what was going to be snowing.
Oh.
That is not true.
It's it. We're recording.
Are we referring?
It has its own.
It has its own channel.
Yes. Yes.
So I want to welcome everyone to the July 18th meeting of the Seattle Design Commission. Our meetings are recorded on MS Teams and we post them on the website along with our minutes after today's meeting. The bulk of today's meeting will be from 9 to 1 today, looking at 3 elements of the West Seattle Light Rail extension. Overview of context, the larger context of the project, of this segment of the project, as well as the SOTO guideways, the investments at Pigeon Point, and the Duwamish Crossing. Why don't we go ahead and start with introductions of commissioners, and then not only our presenters, but people who are also attending. Commissioners, could you make sure that you not only disclose your role on the commission, but any potential, anything that you need to disclose about your role here today?
Great. I think you purposely put me first. Brian Markham, Engineering Commission, and I was part of the VE review team through BMS on Pigeon Point, Delridge, Soto Station, but that will not be the work that we're reviewing today.
Hi, Kate Clark, Art Commissioner.
Zubin Rao, Architect Commissioner.
Ben Gist, Architect Commissioner.
Molly Spitalnik, Urban Design Commissioner.
Jill Curry, at-large commissioner and chair.
Valerie Keenest, staff.
Michael Jenkins.
Juliet Acevedo, staff.
Julie, do you want to?
Yes, I would be happy to start off with introductions from Sound Transit side. My name is Julie Montgomery. I am with Sound Transit and sort of here today as MC. I'm not doing much presenting, but I'm sort of helping orchestrate. I want to try to introduce people in the order that they're speaking, and then I'll support or introduce people who are also here, both online and in the room here. So our first speaker today is
Didi Shahim, Government Community Relations.
and then I think it's Desiree, or do you go?
Alex.
Oh, okay. I guess Desiree Hayes, are you online there?
Wait, we're gonna unmute you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there, she's unmuted. Go ahead, Desiree.
Thank you very much. My name is Desiree Hayes. I come from the Quinault Indian Nation, the Capoman family. I am the Director of Tribal Relations at Sound Transit, and I'm just starting my 5th year. Thank you.
Thank you, Desiree. Next, Alex Stevenson.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, thanks. Alex Stevenson, Cultural Resources Manager at Sound Transit. I'm sorry to not be in person today, but glad to be with you virtually.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Alex. Actually, I'm just going to stick with the people online. Presenting later this morning, Mark Epstein.
Good morning, Mark Epstein. I'm Principal Landscape Architect with Sound Transit.
And Mark, you're a little muted, so before we have you present later, just a note.
Oh, I'm sorry, you said I was muted?
Yeah, a little bit. That's a little bit
A
better.
little quiet.
A little quiet.
Okay, I'll try to get closer to the microphone. Thanks for letting me know.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mark's our Principal Landscape Architect at Sound Transit, so he'll be talking about Pigeon Point later. And then let's see, is Darren online?
I am.
Yes.
Darren Crable, Landscape Architect and Urban Designer, leading station planning and urban design for the West Seattle Ballard Line.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to actually stay with folks online. I think we've hit the presenters. Also joining us online from Sound Transit, Becky Knifton.
Hi, good morning. I'm Becky Knifton. I'm Sound Transit's Environmental Permitting Manager, so managing the permits associated with wetlands, streams, wildlife, that kind of thing.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Becky. And then our last person online, Kate Lichtenstein.
Good morning, Kate Lichtenstein, Sound Transit. I've been helping to coordinate the overall design commission review process with the city staff. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, back to the room. Another one of our presenters, Dirk.
My name is Dirk Baker. I'm with Sound Transit. I'm the design manager for both West Seattle and Ballard Link extensions. And I've been with Sound Transit for over 12 years.
Okay, thanks. And then here to support and field questions, Barbara
Barbara Lukey, I oversee the art program with Sound Transit.
and
Principal Architect, Architecture Reviews for West Seattle and Ballard.
okay. And that was a very long introduction to all of the Sound Transit folks who are here. So thanks for having us.
And a couple of other people, starting with,
I'm Fabian. I'm with SRSDG programs, and I'm the project manager for West Seattle Extension.
Lindsay King, SGCI, the development plan for this project.
and last but not least,
And Justin Clark, I'm part of the.
thanks, Jeff. Okay.
Wonderful. Okay.
Take us away.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so we're here today to talk about all of the guideway structural elements and things around it, from just south of the Soto station all the way to just before Delbridge station. I'm going to get our PowerPoint going here. And here we go. All right, and to really get us into the project and get us going is the engineer here.
Thank you. All right, well, let's go to the next slide. So today we'll go through project background, context and engagement, corridor opportunities, long-span guideway structures. We'll then to the vision point, and finally the Duwamish crossing. So folks may recall the West Seattle Link extension was included in our ST3 plan passed by voters in 2016. We're looking forward to provide fast, reliable light rail connections in the Soto, Delridge, and West Seattle neighborhoods with 4 miles of light rail service and 4 stations. We are currently still in the planning phase for the project until later this year. And then we'll shift towards design from 2024 to 2027 and construction from 2027 to 2032, with service starting at 2032 based on our current plan. In the planning phase, so we have gone through an extensive alternatives development process, as some of you might recall, and now are in the environmental review phase. We published a draft EIS early in 2022, had a 90-day public comment period. We can talk about the engagement level in that. And then the board, the Sound Transit Board, identified preferred alternatives or confirmed modified them. And we are expecting to publish the final EIS right now, late Q3 of this year is the latest. After that, the board will select the project to be built, and we will have the federal record of decision and be able to move into design. In the design phase, we'll be moving towards final route and station design. Some of the activities included in that, included but not limited to station naming, identifying artists for station art, property acquisition and relocation occurring robustly at this time, and early construction activities. We'll also have construction contract procurement work and of course our permitting. So for the final design milestones, we are currently in preliminary engineering design review phase, moving to 30% final design review, 60% final design review, and then a briefing at 90%. Of course, as we move through these phases, there's more and more we know. To get to 90%, we're really at a briefing phase for the project. So each review will inform the next phase, and the design element matrix identifies sort of key elements for each of those phases, and that's great coordination with the city team.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much. All right, and so context and engagement, I'm going to hand it over to, I think, Alex.
Des.
Des.
Yeah.
Des.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Oh, good.
Okay, so First and foremost, we wanted to recognize at Sound Transit our original stewards in the displacement of many tribes in this region. As most of you know, our people, our Salish, coastal Salish people, we were displaced from all of our villages along the Duwamish, the White, the Black, the Green, the Cedar Rivers, and even Lake Washington and the Seattle waterfront. When the settlers came to the area, they pushed us out to different regions that we were not accustomed to. We did thrive and we were able to be resilient. And you'll see a lot of the tribes, you know, throughout the region in different areas, hence the reason we have usual and accustomed areas throughout the Puget Sound. You can see here two of the photos that we wanted to share was one of the historic houses. You know, this is what our people lived in prior to colonization. And like I said, we were pushed aside in the early 1850s, excuse me. You see a lot of tribes going to prairie land that they were not accustomed to. This displacement by settlers changed the region forever. And this is something at Sound Transit that we are very well aware of and something we work with the tribes on daily to make sure, you know, that we are referring to them in the way that they want to be referred to, that we are really understanding that history as we move forward and build the light rail projects throughout not only reservations, but the cities as well. You can go to the next slide, please. Here you will see the history of the waterway. This is a very important place for every coastal Salish tribe, and I work with 14 regional tribes here at Sound Transit. You will all see that the descendants of the native peoples who inhabited the Duwamish and the watersheds around the Puget Sound for thousands of years before non-Indian settlement are still here today. We are here, we are working to safeguard these waterways with every move that we make. As you know, we fished for salmon and trout and steelhead along these rivers. We collected our shellfish here at the Puget Sound, hunted for games, harvested our berries. So it's very important as we move forward that we not only recognize the history of the waterway, but all the traditional uses that are still here. We are still here today, and we are plentiful and really working to ensure that our modern history, as complicated as it is, that we are hand in hand with our partners at the cities, at the state, at the counties, with this group as tribal people, and we move forward with the hardships as learning lessons and ways to preserve not only the land, but the salmon and other fish species as well. You can move to the next slide, please. And then this is current, you know, these are our current Duwamish waterway and tribal practices that we still every day. Annual tribal fishing is huge for our economy. I have so many family members. That's, you know, our bread and butter, if you will. That is our lifeline. Not only does it feed us and our spirit, but it helps bring economic value to our families so we can live and practice and carry on our traditions and the way that we were raised and the way that our ancestors taught us throughout time. So you'll see here a picture of the annual tribal fishing, which we at Sound Transit are very cognizant of the fact that there will be fishing windows that we will definitely take to the top importance and make sure that we are not disturbing as we plan this major project. In addition to that, you will see here the tribal transportation. Our original transportation is on the water. I'm a canoe family myself. My family is the Kapoma family from Quinault. I do have family in Muckleshoot, Puyallup, and other areas as well. But canoe journey is sacred to us, and this is one of the very many current, I would say, celebrations that we are, you know, you probably all see it throughout the area for the last couple decades. You know, we've really brought this back, and we will have canoe journey here July 31st. It will start. So, you know, we're still here, we're still alive, we're still well, and we are definitely doing everything we can to protect the Duwamish and other waterways as we build out these projects. You can go to the next slide. So tribal engagement, as I mentioned, I've been working with my tribe since I was 16 years old. My mentor is Fawn Sharp. She was a previous president of the National Congress of American Indians. And so I'm doing this for about 24 years as a diplomat, and I also have a master's degree in tribal planning. So I work to build out several large projects throughout the state. So I'm very well aware of the federal consultation and the cultural resource guidelines that we have to follow. I lead a team here at Sound Transit and guide them as a strategic advisor in these areas. And then also you'll see Alex on the call, who is my ace when it comes to cultural resources and archaeology. He's amazing at doing that work with our tribes, and he's out, in the field with Muckleshoe. I know that he was out a couple weeks ago, and we met with them yesterday as well as a larger group. So lots of consultation, tons of meetings going on, and a lot of good notes being taken as we move forward with this partnership that is new for many and within the last 5 years. In addition to that, you'll see a lot of engagement at Sound Transit with the federally and non-federally recognized tribes. That isn't necessarily consultation. It's something that my team and we really prioritize. So not only are we just consulting, we're there for meetings anytime they need us. And we're really there, to understand their concerns and make sure that when we build this project, not only are we showcasing our original inhabitants of this land, but that we are ensuring that it's a partnership. They're just as proud and happy of these projects as our people in this region are. Next slide, please. More tribal engagement. I just thought I would note here. So our themes have been, and of course, it's not limited to this, but these are the most noted, I would say. So we have education of public on Indigenous history. So we do a lot of work with the public. We host lunch and learns. We have the National Native American Boarding School Coalition coming in and hosting those, where we open invites to our city, county, state partners. We also have our elders from the tribes, storytellers and historians such as Warren King George that share that education and history with us at every meeting, and we always take time for that. We're focused on preserving our culture, and I will say that that's been a very important pillar throughout the 5 years that I have been here. I am the first tribal relations director at Sound Transit. So prior to that, I can't speak on that, but I know for sure since I've been here, preserving our culture has been very important to our board and all of our employees. In addition to that, we're very focused on restoring the natural environment. What can we do to make this better? When we go through these lands, we are not here to simply provide transportation. We're here to restore and reconnect not only the lands, but our people and our fish and our wildlife. In addition, we are increasing access to natural resources. So you'll see a lot of work with natural resources from the various teams at Sound Transit that work together to make sure that with every project, not just West Seattle Ballard or TDLE, that we are increasing that access. And then finally, I would say probably the most important point for the tribe specifically is cultural resources, making sure that as we move forward, that those resources are protected and our treaty rights are upheld. And you could go to the next slide. And then here are some of the project elements we have discussed, and it includes tribal input. So for instance, yesterday I met with all of the directors at Muckleshoe, including the CEO, to talk more about the station features and art. And we are going to be working with our art team as well as we move forward. So we're at the beginning of this conversation with the directors. However, we've been working for years with other departments and their visioning and what they would like to see as we remember the first people of the Seattle area. A couple things that I wanted to add here for you to see is if you see the picture down in the right corner, that is Sean Peterson. Sean Peterson was the first Puyallup tribal member that we hired at Sound Transit after several barriers that were there prior to my employment. So Barbara and the art team and I worked together collaboratively to, for instance, we dropped the insurance requirement because tribal artists don't have insurance. We don't even have to have car insurance on the res, you know, so that was something that we worked diligently to make sure that they get to do art and they're not worried about these other responsibilities. In addition to that, we also made sure that they don't have to fabricate. You know, tribal artists, it's a different world, you know, it's a different way of life and looking that we've been taught from a young age traditionally. So Barbara and I quickly removed those two barriers, and now we have a list of tribal artists that is absolutely phenomenal. So you'll see Sean Peterson there. An important note as well is he is the first tribal artist of Puyallup to do art in the city of Puyallup. The city of Puyallup had never welcomed that, but Sound Transit and our team, we were diligent. We had the utmost integrity, and we made sure that the original people of the Puyallup would be showcased. So you will see that the station features are all tribal, the art. We have some amazing signage and history that's shared there. And then you'll also know as we move forward, the landscape and design restoration will also be important for this project specifically. And the tribe wants to integrate educational pieces, you know, and of course, integrate Lushootseed into the system as that is the original language of this territory. So that's short and sweet. Of course, I'm happy to answer questions, but this is just some of the work that we're doing. I think there's one more picture if you want to change slides here. Oh, that was it. So we do have more pictures. We have tons of documents in regards to this, or pictures, excuse me, in regards to the station, and you can always visit. We also have another project at the Auburn station where Muckleshoot is showcasing their art as that is their UNA. So we really focus on ensuring that the tribes that have UNA within the region have the first opportunity to share culture. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm happy to ask any or answer any questions. Cecile Quill.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. We are going to go through the rest of our the different topics here, and I'm sure we'll have questions for you. Thank you. For Phoebe, I apologize. I forgot to include you in introductions. Please.
I can do it now. Phoebe Wu with Sound Transit. I'm a senior engagement specialist for the West Seattle Lane Extension project. So I'll walk through and talk about the community engagement effort that our team has been doing since 2018. So as I mentioned, our team has been actively involved in community engagement for this project a long time ago, since 2018. Mentioned in the slides. Our goal is to keep the community informed and also involved at every stage. So in 2018, since 2018, we implement a broad range of different outreach methods to engage the public. I won't go through every detail that listed in this slide, but I just wanted to highlight we've done tons of one-on-one and also group briefings with different stakeholders, and also hosted a lot of public meetings and neighborhood forums to engage the public, gather feedback to inform the design team. Next slide, please. Thank you. So building public awareness and also maintain the relationship with different stakeholders is, are the primary goal of community engagement. So this slide shows how we notify the public about our recent engagement through different channels, including digital communications, in-person outreach, and also setting up tables at our local events in West Seattle. Next slide, please. Thank you. We also translated our materials into different languages and upload them to our online open houses, which is also accessible in different languages and also serves as a primary tool for accessing all the projects, updates, and project informations. Thank you. We continue to partner with our partner, the City of Seattle Department of Neighborhood Community Liaisons Program. We also work with 6 community liaisons who have existing community networks, connections, and also most of them are bilingual and multilingual, who also support the engagement efforts for our projects. Thank you. Next slide. So here's an overlook of our community engagement scheduled and also highlight some of the past engagement work that we've done over time. So community engagement has always been a cornerstone, as you can see on the slide. It's also always been a cornerstone throughout every phase of the project. Since 2018 scoping period, station planning, and also during the whole environmental review phase. The upcoming, as you can see, in the near future, when we transition into the design phase, we'll provide more opportunity for public inputs and provide feedback when we transition to the project's next phase. Next slide. So here, we recently completed the station planning engagement event or campaign for the West Seattle Link Extension project, which was divided into 2 phases. The first phase was kicked off in fall last year, and the second phase embarked in spring this year. So we gathered community feedback on station access, urban design, and transit-oriented developments for all 4 new future light rail stations in West Seattle and SoDo. Some early concepts of today's discussion topic were displayed during the second phase of the station planning engagement events. Earlier this year, we had nearly 200 individuals participating and sharing their insights in both in-person and open houses, respectively. We also recognizing the importance of inclusivity. We also launched an online survey for those who were unable to attend in-person open houses after the first open house meeting. Also, we conduct a series of wrap-around engagements, such as doing community briefings, in-language focus group, attend SoDo drop-ins and table, etc. That to ensure that we reach out to as many stakeholders as possible. All materials that we shared during the station plan engagement were translated into Spanish, Somali, and Vietnamese language, and also available online. Next slide. Here's a brief look of our station plan engagement efforts, since fall to spring earlier this year. So I won't go through all the numbers here, but I just highlight some key results to showcase the depth of our engagement. So we hosted 2 in-person open houses, engaged with over 400 individuals. We facilitate 2 in-language focus group, which is conducted in Vietnamese, Somali, and other East African languages. We also participated in 2 SoDo drop-in events to further connecting with the community. In terms of online engagement, we received over 1,200 completed responses in English and other languages through our online survey. And we also did a total of 10 community briefings and participated in 6 fair and festival and tabling events. I just wanted to mention that we have included the slides and later in the presentations that highlights more engagement efforts specific to the segments and also the geographic area. So there's more to it.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we're going to slightly shift focus now. Darren is going to talk to us about corridor opportunities throughout this SoDo segment and across the Duwamish.
Thanks, Julie. So we'll be talking, I'll be talking about the corridor opportunities. And as you know, the stretch between SoDo Station and Delridge Station is primarily elevated. There's another stretch of elevated track between Delridge and Avalon. We'll be covering that later in the fall when we talk about Delridge Station. Next slide, please. The guideway in this section, and we're highlighting it with the properties that we would need to likely acquire for construction in green with the white dash outline. We're looking at all these areas for other opportunities to provide public space, transportation, non-motorized transportation pieces. But there are a lot of challenges throughout this corridor as well. Steep slopes, water crossings, crossings of Spokane Viaduct, connecting into the O&M facility, existing O&M facility. But with these challenges also come potential opportunities. And our team has looked across this corridor at these parcels for opportunities to enhance those and make them not just a corridor for structure, but for people. Next slide, please. In this corridor, we also start with what is happening at the city in their current projects or planned projects. And I want to highlight a couple of those where we are their guideway structure is crossing those. On the right side of the map is the Georgetown to downtown bike corridor project, which is nearing design completion. I believe construction is planned shortly. And we cross that, both engage it actually on the north for the Ballard project. So we won't talk about that here today, but we also engage it south of Soto, where it connects into the Soto Trail, the existing Soto Trail. And, oh, can you go back one more? Yep, thank you. And on the west, as we approach the Duwamish waterway, there's some corridor improvements happening along East Marginal Way. So we work with the city to identify these any kind of projects in the area where we can potentially enhance the connection or provide additional connections if it's appropriate. Next slide, please. We'll start with the corridor in the Soto area. This elevated area, we note that there's going to be opportunities to engage in the Soto station. We know there's a long history of art through this corridor in the Soto busway through activation of murals. There's also opportunities for enhanced landscape and potential trail connections and additional lighting. So these are all things that the team has looked at a high level through this corridor, and we'll continue to investigate those opportunities as we move forward in further stages of planning and design. Next slide. Thank you. As the Harbor Island area, where the Duwamish River crossing has several landing spots for the structure, we have looked at several different options of providing enhanced landscape, potential connections to existing trails that cross the lower Spokane, near Spokane Street. And along the water edges, we know that there's a requirement for restoration and have to look at not only the minimum, but also some enhanced opportunities for enhanced restoration along the water's edge. Next slide, please. As we go further west towards West Seattle and the crossing, the West Duwamish crossing portions directly along the waterway, again, are being considered for shoreline restoration per state requirements, but also additional areas depending on how land is used after the construction uses. So in the dark green, you'll see those are the pieces where ST will likely continue to control and portions of that land. We'll use that for stormwater uses, enhanced tree plantings, for additional tree coverage. The light green also, that can also be used for those uses, but there's also a potential that portions of this land could be returned to water dependent business operations, or being surplus for that purpose. I just will also highlight here that, you know, all the lands that are adjacent to water are, these are in constant conversation with the tribes, as well as with the city. There's a lot of interest in those pieces of property. I know there was some discussion in our last briefing with you around what is a TPSS. These are critical infrastructure for link operations, providing power to the light rail, and they have to happen at certain intervals. Dirk can tell you much more about that than I can. But there's some interest in understanding what they look like and how we what we do around them. So we have two potential concepts we're showing here. This one is located south of Spokane Street. We look at several options because of the potential for surplus land parcels that could be put up for sale after the use of construction, or there's obviously an option where we can again use that land for enhanced tree plantings and vegetation for additional tree coverage and habitat enhancement. On the top right, you can see an example of an enclosure from Eastlink. You know, these all take different design cues from sometimes the neighborhood, sometimes a larger cue from the project itself. And so while this is an example that has trellis for climbing vines and some more closed off, more opaque fencing options, there really can run the gamut of the design considerations and how these TPSS enclosures are handled. Next slide. And I think that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Darren. And we're going to pass it to Dirk now to talk about long-standing structures.
Thank you. Thank you, Darren, for showing the ground. Now we'll talk about the structures. The elevated structure that we're going to be speaking about today is the stretch from Soto Station, where we are at grade, to pretty much the Harbor Island. We'll talk about the Duwamish crossing later. So these are the guideway spans that we'll discuss today. The title here says long span guideway. Just a little preamble to that. Sound Transit typically likes to build like 130 feet long span length, and you'll see those span lengths on the Linwood and East Link projects. Project over here is a little different because of all of the other infrastructure that is in this area that we would need to span and properties and so forth. So in this area, most of the spans are what's considered long span in the 250 feet and more range. And so we're using superstructures, which are the decks. These are segmental box girders, and we prefer to build those in balanced cantilever style. We selected those segmental box girders because they're very functional. They're structurally efficient, especially in this location. They provide redundancy. We've done these before, and by going long span and minimizing the foundations on the ground. A majority of the piers, because they're lengths, they're double leaf columns with fill sections between those columns near the ground. These double leaf columns are kind of evolutions from piers that we've designed before in previous projects, and we'll show some of those. And an important aspect is that we really looked at the compatibility between the cable stay piers and then the piers of those long spans that make the approach to the cable stay. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So these are some examples of work we've done before, and you probably are familiar with it. This is central link examples, and you can see there's double leaf columns there, and these are long spans and cantilever. Next slide. Here's some Eastlink examples. This is going over I-90, that's a very long span. And then there's the span over I-405 in Bellevue, and you can see some architectural enhancements as part of that project. So this proportionate scale, this has been an item for us, if I may say. It's been a long puzzle to get all the columns and spans figured out. We started out obviously with shorter spans, and then through progressive iterations, we settled on a number of spans that we currently have. So we're only really showing where we ended up, but obviously a lot of work went into that. But one of the things that we really look at, because this is such a high structure, it's very visible, and so be viewable from a lot of different locations. So the proportion and scale has been really looked at from an engineering architectural perspective. And you can see here, I won't go through all of the dimensions here, but the point is, because it's so tall and the structure is so big, proportion is very important. Next slide. Here's a little view of the piers that we will be integrated with the long spans themselves. And you can see again, we've given that a lot of thought. And these are some of the ideas that we think are would work very well in this area. And you can see the double leaf columns and how they're integrated with the spans. Right. When we start our structures in the E3 busway, where we come from grade and rise up to go across Spokane, in that area we still have shorter spans, more our typical spans. And here you see a detail of how we would transition from those shorter spans, which have different structural systems, different beams, girder systems, but this picture shows that we would really pay attention to that detail to go from one span length to another, from one structure type to another. Thank you. Here's another slide that explains that. So our typical short spans are pre-stressed eye girders, and you can see those on the left side in the picture. And then you can see how we would transition to a longer span, which would have a different girder type, and in this case, that box girder. So the columns that we're using for our shorter spans, and we've been using this on our other project, is the orthogonal, and it has a cap. And so that's nothing new. That's been accepted on other portions of our system. And you can see there at Sound Transit on Eastlink, Linwood, and Redmond Link extension. So it's just an extension, and we do like to have a certain standardization where that makes sense, and we believe in this area here that makes sense. Next slide.
again. Okay.
Yeah, we're not that. And this is more of a rendering of that transition. We're trying to really focus on the structure here and how that transition would work. This is a view taken from if you're standing on the E3 busway, looking towards Fourth Avenue. You can see that transition between those structure types. Here's a view if you're on East Marginal Way. Again, this is a little bit different, but again, it's just a good view of the long span structures. Here's a view from the West Seattle Bridge, and it's already shown the cable stay, but you can see in the distance we have our long span structures, and it gives a sense of how it works with the West Seattle Bridge and how it would be viewed. Here, I think this is an important crossing. So we just looked at it. If you were on the E3 busway and you were looking at that structure, and potentially in the future in the E3 busway, if there's other programming there, you would see it. You could see it standing up. Here, you will always be seeing it driving your car, and it's important we keep those proportions in mind because this will be always viewable. Next slide. Here you would be coming from the other direction, and gives you an idea of the size of this, the scale of this structure. Obviously, it's not out of place in this area where there's a lot of big things, but here it's crossing Spokane. Oh,
okay. All right. That was a lot of information. We took you from the overall project timeline, revisiting of some of the outreach and engagement. Desiree gave a much more in-depth picture of how we're engaging with the tribes and that work that's been going on. And then we talked about some corridor opportunities along this segment of guideway we're talking about. And then we talked about the actual guideway. So thank you for being the audience for all that. I'm sure you have questions, so please.
Right, so this is our time for clarifying questions. And not recommendations. And not discussion. And this is complex, so I expect that people to have some very interesting questions. Ben, you're leading this part, right? So we should probably have you go.
Well, first, let's just do the clarifying question.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to figure out an order or something. So I think you should probably go last. So Brian, I guess it's your turn to start again.
Oh, he hates that. He hates that.
So,
I don't mind it.
oh, you signed that.
Yeah, I was put here. It was. Thank you, guys. Really excited to see transit expanding in our region. So anything we can do to help is definitely something that we'd like to be part of. I was very intrigued by the land part of this. Always trying to wonder how we activate the plots of land that are directly below some rather tall structures. And I know that we have some utilities that are necessary to be there. I'd love to understand a little bit more, probably from you, Darren, to understand what kind of activation is underneath there. And I come from New York, and in Roosevelt Island, there's softball fields and wonderful community activities underneath tall structures. And I think it's a real opportunity to not just put trees, but to put things that people can use and engage with. And I know it's early stages, so I don't know if you can really help more with that, Darren, but it's that's where I'd like to focus.
I guess I'm wondering, is that a discussion question amongst us, or are you asking him a question?
I'm asking a question of typology, right? Like we're looking at very tall structures, and a lot of the ideas is the land that's adjacent to it, but not necessarily directly under the guideway. Are we fencing off the directly under portion, or are we trying to activate that? How is that associated with these partial plots?
Yeah, so I mean, at a baseline, we have a lot of landscape restoration and trees. We hope to incorporate into some of these along the stretch. But that's at the most basic level. This is a really complicated stretch from a land use perspective. So it's not exactly a place where a softball field is, maybe warranted. Not that I took your suggestion literally, but just as like a point of reference.
Yeah.
Also, the land is not that big in a lot of areas, and where the land is of significant size, we do need to balance the property that we retain for operations and maintenance with trying to make the most of its use in this critical space of, industrial and type of land use that is really important to the city and this region. So it is a balance, and we'll continue to need to weigh those different trade-offs and the needs of both Sound Transit and what can happen there. Now, we have looked at and worked with the city to consider, for example, would it make sense to put a bike trail through here or not, or different bike connections or non-motorized connections? The stretch between, let's say, the East Duwamish Waterway along Spokane Street is really complicated because there's lots of rail lines, there's lots of freight traffic. There's already existing bike infrastructure to the north side of there. And as I showed, there's a new connection happening north-south, East Marginal Way. So we have looked at it. We'll continue to look at it and see what makes sense to happen. But it is a balancing act, and it does need to weigh in some of those safety factors. And is it a corridor that wants it, needs it? Does it align with the city's plans long term for that type of infrastructure? So we're looking at a wide range of uses underneath the guideway, but we do need to consider where we're at in the city and the land uses in and around it.
Yeah,
Hopefully that gets to what you're asking.
Yeah, just to be very clear, I think I'm most interested in between 99 and 4th Avenue, because we already have fenced off regions underneath the Spokane Viaduct. And now we're putting another parallel, possibly fenced off region, a partial block away from it. And so you're going to have all these little things between the two infrastructure pieces, and reactivating that is going to be difficult with lots of different things. So that's where I would.
As I understand it, our practice and the standard is not necessarily just to fence off everything. Obviously, critical infrastructure utility pieces, we do need to keep secure and provide parking and places for people to work. So there is some fencing that happens, but just like a general fence line across the whole entire guideline is guideway is not a normal practice. We have to consider it case by case. So.
Thanks everyone for the presentation, and I'm looking forward to seeing the more detailed info as well. But it's really exciting. And Darren, I actually had a follow-up question for you as well. I was just curious, on my version of the presentation on page 29, you mentioned it briefly, but I couldn't quite hear. Could you clarify again what that light green swath of land is for at the West Duwamish crossing?
Yeah, this is our best guess right now of land. Like the darker green is likely land, subject to change, of course. Likely land that Sound Transit would consider holding for maintenance and access to the guideway. Whereas the lighter green will consider different types of surplusing. So it could, if there's, it could be surplused for back to the market for land-related uses. Maybe there's a conversation with tribes and city about other types of uses. So I think that's the land where there's a little bit more flexibility that we see currently in how it could be used in the future. There's lots of conversations that will help inform that over the next few years.
And do you think those conversations or updates about that might be shared in 30, 60, 90% for this?
Yeah, well, I think we'll continue. It's an evolution, of course. And so I think we'll have updates as we go, and we'll provide them as we have them. Lots of those conversations are, sensitive for lots of different reasons. So,
sure.
But yeah, where we can, we'll definitely provide updates.
Great, thanks. I had another question for Desiree. Thank you for your presentation, and it was great to get a little more detailed information about all of the great work y'all are doing. And this was Desiree. Actually, I had a question for at the last meeting that maybe you could provide a little more detail on. You mentioned collaboration with both federally and non-federally recognized tribes, and this was a question I had at the past meeting, so I'll just follow up because maybe you can provide a little more information since this location is so proximate to the Duwamish Longhouse. I was curious, you mentioned some of the opportunities for tribal engagement with station features and art and interpretive signage and educational info and landscape restoration and Lushootseed translation, which is so wonderful and robust. And so I was curious about what those conversations or engagement was like so far with the Duwamish tribe, considering the proximity.
Yes, definitely. So at Sound Transit, I'm sure you're aware of this, but if you take $1 of federal money for any project, the feds work directly with the consultation process under 25 CFR Part 170. And so basically what we are doing now is working alongside the non-federally recognized tribes as Sound Transit. So that's different from federal because of the funding, but we meet with them. Alex and I, from the beginning, we've both been here together for 5 years now. We take it upon ourselves because, of course, all people are very important and all views are important as we move forward. So we do meet with them. We've had probably at least a dozen meetings with the Duwamish throughout my tenure here at Sound Transit. But again, the requirements are very different. So this is just something that Sound Transit does to make sure that we are hearing all of the voices, like I said.
Great. And yeah, I know it's challenging with that, the federal requirements versus non-federal requirements. So do you anticipate there being continued conversations?
Oh yeah, we have meetings with them often, actually. So I'm not sure when the next one is scheduled. I wish I could remember, but I do serve 14 regional tribes. But I know that we will have upcoming meetings. They're very interested in like Pigeon Point and restoration and so forth. So we spend a lot of time preparing presentations specifically for the Duwamish, and then we also have Steilacoom and Snohomish as well that are non-federally recognized tribes. So 3 of the 14 regional tribes are not federally recognized, but we definitely engage with them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And then one last question. I was just curious about, it was great to hear and see the typologies for the Longspan guideways. And I'm really excited about just the way the diamond shaped bridge. I'm not sure the exact name that you're giving that. The bridge itself.
It's called the diamond pylon.
The diamond pylon.
Some people call it the needle.
The needle. Well, I think the needle, it's great that it already has a simple name because I think it will become this really iconic form in the landscape, and that's really exciting. And I was curious, Barbara, I know you didn't present, but just if there were thoughts about art treatments for those long span guideways. It's such a big surface area, and I know you all have done that in the past with other stations and small ways like.
We've found it's
Okay.
very difficult to work on the guideways because of the maintenance requirements and how these are precast structural pieces. It's very difficult to add anything to them. So Dirk and his team, I think, have done a great job of just making the form elegant in and of itself. And we would be thinking about the ground plane around this area and what we've heard from the tribes about how important restoration is, botanical training. They really would like to develop some places where they can have true teaching moments for the public and their tribe. And I think that's where we can be more effective on this guideway.
Cool. Well,
with our dollars that are kind of small,
right,
relative to everything else.
Makes sense to focus on the ground plane with that. Okay, so thank you. Those are all my questions. Appreciate it.
Okay. And of course, a lot more on the bridge to come in our third.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the presentation. I don't think I really have any questions actually. I was involved in some of the subcommittees, and I think the presentation was really clear and great. So obviously looking forward to getting into some of the details later on, but yeah, any questions at the moment?
Give me, go to you.
Okay, so similarly, I want to thank you all. Many of the questions that we had as you prepared for this presentation, you've built into the presentation. So I don't have any additional questions at this time, and I greatly appreciate that.
So I have a couple of questions. It seems like, Darren, there was a page and a detail that you went by that wasn't in our packet, and I think it's around page 24. You can go there. And it just went so, it went kind of quick, my eyes don't focus. Is that one maybe?
That's just an overview.
To keep going forward?
So that's jumping, oops.
It's this one, right? What's that detail in the upper right? I can't read any of that. So we blow that up?
I will, yeah.
That is the connection from Georgetown to downtown. This is a city project, City of Seattle SDOT project, providing bike lanes from obviously Georgetown up to near Lander, and then it connects in with Soto, and then Soto Trail, the existing Soto Trail, up near the existing stadium station, and then it takes a little bit of a jog up to 6th. And so that will be that piece right there. That is the best graphic that we have from the city, unfortunately. Just sort of suggests where some painted bike lanes will go in the interim. But we'll definitely be addressing this later on when we talk about Ballard Lake extension. So we can, but just wanted to show the overall connections and how we overlap between different projects that the city is planning on versus the Sound Transit project.
And so the point is that You were trying to do the future coordination to do that, is that?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great. Then on the guideway, again, I was trying to kind of make sure that I understood the big picture. Were you trying to say that the short spans and the mid spans and the long spans are gonna have different articulation that will be viewable, or that it's all gonna match
Um,
from the sides?
it's going to be nicely detailed, I think. But you know, in order for it to be a nice transition and not something that, what's the right word?
Flashes.
Flashes, yeah. And so that's what we intend to show with this. So you can see there's a different column that is being used for the,
Yeah, but on the span itself, it looks like there's different articulation and at the bottom and.
yeah, the long spans are box beams, so they're basically closed beams, and then the short spans, at least in this typical configurations, are eye girders, so they're just concrete
It's on the
eyes.
bottom that I see.
Yeah, so it's, you know, when you're just looking at it, it just looks like flat, but
Yeah, I think there's a section that maybe shows that
I know,
more
I was
clearly.
thinking
I think it's like one page before or two pages before. There you go. That's, yeah.
So I couldn't tell if kind of the big picture messaging of the 39, 40, and 41 is that you're not going to perceive any of that. Then you're just going to perceive this sleek thing up there. Or if you are going to perceive the differences in that articulation.
Or that you're trying to not have an abrupt change from one structure.
yeah, I mean, that's what we're trying to show here. You know, as to how much you know, the box girder is a little angle, right? And the shorter spans, which you won't see, you know, on those, where you could see it on 39, we were trying to show it there, but they're two different systems, and you have to marry them up, and you have to do that in a way that it doesn't clash, or, you know, that you're, but that's, you know, I think you used the word elegant, right? So thank you that, you know, and I think you, the proportions of the bridge, you know, we did not only have an engineer, but we did have an architect look at that and kind of refine that a little bit. The proportions is what's important on such a huge structure. You know, is it going to look strange, or is it going to be pleasant to the eye, and nothing really becomes known as something weird?
Yeah, I just couldn't decide what you were trying to tell us.
Yeah, and maybe there isn't that much to say. It's kind of, you have to look at it and see how smooth it is. There isn't, at least I cannot say more than it's there so that we can transition to different structure types.
Okay, thanks.
I think Molly had one additional question for you.
Yeah, so this is a question for Darren as well. And it's just, I'm curious about a little bit more specificity between Marginal Way along Spokane Street, from Marginal Way over to the Soto Trail or to the Georgetown to Soto connection. Can you share some of the specific challenges in that area for bike connections?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few rail lines. If you're to look closely down there, we don't have a great image of that, but if you were to go walk around there, there's lots of like spur rail lines that make crossings quite difficult. So, I mean, not impossible, but not like a shoe-in, like we should definitely do this. And I think it's not necessarily, I don't know, we'll have to continue to have the conversation with the city about whether this really is a desire line for bike riders, because it's not exactly where it's coming from is not where bikers are coming off of. There's quite a bit of interest, coming off of the lower bridge from West Seattle and to then dip down south to under the guideway doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, where you're going to have just as many crossings, if not more crossings, because of the spur rail lines and other things like that, and truck traffic. So we'll continue to look at it, but it's not like, it's a really difficult stretch there.
Great. And a similar question for going from Marginal Way over to the Lander Street crossing area. Has the team studied that east-west in depth?
Marginal Way
So if you were
along
to
the Lander.
Yeah, so then going east-west on Lander.
Well, east-west on Lander already has what the city, I think, would consider a shared use trail across the existing Lander Bridge. And we'll get into Lander more when we talk about Soto Station. There's lots of design talk around connecting that stretch of the existing Lander Bridge to Soto Station, but obviously we don't have the visuals for that here, but we'll do that in September. So
great, thank you.
But that's sort of like outside of our footprint of the project, right? So we could potentially work with the city for a non-motorized access project if that was the desire to make that connection.
Great, thank you.
I have no further questions and looking forward to the discussion.
Great, and I think you've got 4 categories that you've identified for discussion, and people will just raise their hands if they want to discuss those topics.
Yeah.
And
so,
Can I just talk about time really quick? Because we already, even if we had stayed on time, we would have had about 5 minutes for each topic. Now we don't. So now we have about 2 to 3 minutes per topic. So if we can just be succinct and, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
even if we had stayed on time, as I should begin by saying.
We had stayed on time.
Yeah, so we have, like as Jill suggested, we have 4 main categories, and you guys did a great job of presenting on each one of those. So we have engagement and equity, corridor opportunities, the Soto guideways, specifically in relationship to aesthetics, circulation for bikes and pedestrians around the sites, and sustainability. And then if there's any additional information or special information that we need for our next conversation, to ask for that. So we'll start out with engagement and equity, and with anyone, and then just like the commissioners, we are speaking with, this is our time to speak with each other. So anyone would like to speak to engagement and equity for recommendations or conversation?
Just for this, just being for conversation, I really appreciated hearing from Desiree, and then I'm very interested in what that ends up in the design at 30%. So
I think we heard that there's a lot of outreach. I'm not sure that we heard much of what the outreach resulted in.
exactly.
And I'm hoping we hear that more as we
Yeah.
go down. And, yeah.
And so it might be helpful to continue to hear what we already know about what it might impact in final design, and then continue to hear about that in 30% to understand how that engagement is reflected in what will be physically built.
That is entirely consistent with your policy on equity in the design of public spaces and places, and we ask for that in the handbook. So that 30% will be key to that.
But I think it's important to keep in mind what Kate was, what she was trying to make about proximity of things too. And I think when we get into outreach and picture point, other places, it's like, outreach, but then it's like, what are you really doing for these people who are right and affected? So I want to make sure we keep that front of mind too. The proximity question.
Sort of what is the general feeling and then what is the localized response?
What creative things are being done about those really affected person?
And I think that that speaks to the people immediately living in the area, Jill, and also to what Kate was bringing up about the Duwamish and the specialness to some of the tribes, including the non-federally recognized tribes that are being engaged. And so what is really the community desire and tribal desire for some of those spaces that do have a very special location that often doesn't have, there often aren't these parcel opportunities in the city for the Duwamish to and some of the other federally recognized tribes to really have this water adjacent area that they're able to impact and to address some of the things Desiree was sharing about cultural visibility, but also restoration.
Well, I do think the concern we had last time about Indigenous consultation is something we can drop. I think it's really interesting.
I agree.
Agreed.
I think there's an aspect of outreach as well. There's natural habitat. And I know one of those green squares is actually the heron nesting area on Pigeon Point. So that's a little bit of outreach as well as maybe to those who can't speak, but.
That's specific.
Okay, anything further on engagement and equity? Okay. Corridor opportunities, and I really appreciated your comment about there could be other activities and uses below the in the surplus sites. I'm very curious about that as well, and would like to see. I think it could be a really interesting thing to have, almost like a list of potential uses under this site. I was just doing a little bit of research, and I know in New York they have this thing called Under the Elevated. I'm not sure if it's active anymore, but they were studying different uses for under, their elevated transportation systems. And it sounds silly, but maybe it's not softball fields, but it could be pickleball courts, which is almost a joke these days, and that could be out of favor by the time this gets built. But something like a little bit more, a list of potential opportunities and uses under the site could be kind of an enjoyable, helpful thing to discuss next time. So that was my comment on that part.
So similarly, we also talked about the bike potential in some of those areas. So what is the programming as well as the who is brought to it are in alignment with each other. And I would ask if others agree that we should be briefed by SDOT about their goals for that entire stretch, that under guideway stretch through Soto, to really understand some of the things that Sound Transit will be coordinating with SDOT on, be aligned with SDOT on that. So I would ask for us to be briefed. Do others agree with that?
I agree, sure.
I thought, Brian, when we were out there and looked at it, I was trying to visualize side by side guideways, right? Elevated. But when you brought up the idea of these side by side unused fenced off areas at the ground level, it's like, whoa, that's something that I hadn't really been thinking about. And I think honestly, people might experience that more than the other stuff.
Yes.
Worried about. So I do think it's important to keep track of that as we go forward.
I think that's one of my main concerns is that Spokane is already one of the worst elevated guideway locations. We're below it. And then you're going to leave these little triangle spaces between the guideways, and then we're going to have our guideway. What do you do with the three of those together is the biggest challenge of this, I think.
And in the presentation, what they shared was in areas like the TPSS being in those areas, there's already some optionality with that either includes TOD parcels that are likely smaller industrial, or some of that industrial innovative Soto district, or it's more vegetated. Our question is also how can it be programmed and activated? And so what I know we'll want to see at 30% design once the final design team is on board, is comprehensive thinking about, you mentioned this earlier, about some of the challenges on each of those parcels, and then what are the opportunities on some of those parcels, because they will differ across that area. And so if we can look systematically at each parcel when the final designers are on board, that would really help us understand the decision-making.
Yeah, and I think
TOD activation.
I think we have to be realistic with ourselves. TOD is probably not going to happen between two elevated guideways, right? Like that is going to be the last spot that a developer will want to come in and try and activate.
Right? They're quite small.
Yeah, and I think there, there could be opportunities that are like actually serve the character of that neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a industrial working neighborhood. Maybe it's a pocket park where people can just go and have lunch, like sometimes there's no public places in these like dense industrial areas. So, it's not going to be a softball field, but maybe it's a place someone can just go after work and hang out for a few minutes before they go pick up their kid or whatever. It's like just a little green space to support the people who are actually in that neighborhood.
Right, and that also involves the landscape architects or urban designers who are brought onto the final design team, looking at things like what does have activated frontages around it, what would feel safe to spend time in, and that helps prioritize which of these spaces could actually be activated in a way that feels safe to people.
Okay. Any further comments on corridor opportunities? Okay, so the SOTO guideways, and we're specifically trying to focus on aesthetics, circulation, and sustainability. Can you pull up slide, I think it's 39 of your presentation. Slide 39 of the presentation. One of the things that I was noticing about the columns, the design of the columns, there's sort of two families of columns, as I understand. There's the short span and then the long span column. Maybe it's the slide or the one that shows the one where the transition happens.
Like that one?
Sure, yeah, that one's fine. That's great. So there's two different column types, they're not necessarily shown really well here, but it looks like where the transition happens, it's sort of half of one column and half of the other column, which creates a third type. And I guess, Zubin, or for the team, I'm wondering if it would be a cleaner design if one of those column types could be chosen. And I know it'd be kind of fake because like there's the engineered structure of it that seems like it's resolved and solved here, but it's like a third column. It's sort of a little bit of a Frankenstein column, or it feels like it is to me. And I almost wouldn't. I don't know if I really have an opinion on which side it went. I think it would be a more elegant solution if you chose one column to make it look more like one column than kind of two of them glued together.
I think this slide is a little more complex than it seems, because we also have a transition from the long span to the cable stayed bridge, and that's another transition. This one is probably in the north-south zone right before you turn to the long span guideline. And then within that long span, we're actually going to transition from the box to the larger bridge. And then you have that transition as well. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's almost an opportunity to put a needle here and a needle at the other transition, and then the big bridge is a needle, right? Like, and so you're sort of referencing the path. I don't know if that's a designer in me trying to.
The needle.
What do you mean by needle?
The cable stayed bridge needle.
The diamond.
The diamond.
But
this one doesn't have. This one doesn't have.
Well, we already going to have two pylons.
But this doesn't have any use for it, right? It would just be purely aesthetic to reference the other one, but it wouldn't have any cable stays on it.
Correct. I'm just trying to say that we have more column typologies than just this slide. We have the diamonds. We have the one that catches the interface between the diamond and the box girder, which is actually a very thick to a pretty thin thing. That's going to be more tricky than this one. This one's almost the same depth.
Yeah.
And
it's a lot less visible.
Rich presentation.
Oh, I,
Well, before we get to that one, is anyone in agreement that this could be one way or the other? I'm almost, for me, I'm not sure if I really
I think
care. I
the,
just think,
I think the better slide is the next one after this that shows the,
Need a family of homes to be.
yeah, you can see that top
No.
image. Are you referring to that?
yeah, yes, and even, I think the bottom one too. So it's got like the corbel that sticks out of it on, or the, I guess the long span, or the short span, the short span, and then the long span is flat, so it does look like you took two columns and glued them together, sort of. I'm just wondering if one of them can take ownership of the aesthetics on that column.
Yeah, that was gonna be my exact same comment. I feel like, I don't mind that they come together, they're
Yeah.
similar depth,
Yeah.
let them be what they need to be, but yeah, just make it look like one or the other.
One or the other, and
So it's not a third type.
yeah, not a third type of column.
And I guess I would lean toward the short span version, kind of just making a, thicker version of the short span one or something, and then letting the two cantilever portions kind of be.
We have
there.
some people chomping at the bit.
And they'll get their.
Okay.
But it seems to me like this is just shaping up to be a recommendation of.
Yeah.
Take a look at the column types and at 30%, we'd really like to see all of them on a page so we understand a bit.
I
And are
think,
you saying more continuity between?
Yeah, just.
well,
yeah.
and
I mean,
in
if it's
relationship, yeah, to that continuity, this may be too large of a question, but because the needle diamond has such a specific aesthetic to it, that seems like there's been a lot of choices made around that. I'm wondering if some small elements from that could then be referenced in
Cues and clues can you take from that?
in those spans, in the form of those spans. I know it's a huge engineering question, but with going back to what you're talking about of design typology, so if they're family members, like.
I don't know how huge it is. I mean, one of the subsequent ones that Darren pointed out from Eastland, he said some design application has been added to that. It looked like sort of a technical step. That hasn't been applied to this yet. And it seems like that's a later, but that's the perfect time in the evolution to say, as you evolve, if you look at architectural enhancements for these columns, look for some cues from the.
Yeah, for me, I'm not, I don't think that is important. I think it would be, personally, I feel like it would be a little bit of a little bit like gingerbready to take a big needle case that's actually has a purpose and a function, it's engineered for it to kind of make it another thing over here. Yeah, and I just want to, yeah. Well, no, maybe there's like, I know that some of them, they have like a vertical kind of a recess on them or something. So for me, I just think that rather than having a third column type, we can have it be more like one or the other. And I think it's probably accurate to you that the short span will probably take precedent because I think you have to have that corbel that sticks out. So it was just,
it's like you could almost have that same double wide expression on the shorts that's supporting the two.
And it doesn't mean exactly, it's just, this one just looks like it got.
Right.
Just, can you go to 43? Your numbers are different than our numbers.
It's two above. The next one.
That bridge, and then zoom in on the interface between the cable stay and the long span structure columns.
At the base of the.
Those columns are what I'm trying to reference, is that there's another transition.
Yeah.
I'm getting there.
Not the diamond column, but the one that's the transition between the box girder and the.
Way back there?
No.
Like right where.
Oh, yeah, good. That's actually better.
This guy is that deep box girder comes into a column and then it's just a flat deck. There's another interface that we're not zoomed in on.
Okay. Well, would we agree? We just need some more information at the 30% and maybe request that there's rather than a new column type, that could then be a recommendation or.
Yeah, so I think just just
Yeah.
reduce the number of
Explore
column
the-
types to the minimum
The first one that sort of rises to the recommendation one here.
like avoid, you know,
Yeah. Okay.
avoid mashup column types. Yeah.
And then on the, and maybe this was more on the corridor opportunities. So the I think it's called the TPSS sites. I'm wondering, kind of in a similar vein, if there's a language of, I don't know how many of these TPSS sites there are, but I think there's one in the thing that along
There's one in the
area
trail
that-
track.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if there's like an opportunity to have all of them have a language or an art or something so that across the city, they're kind of recognizable and there could be a little bit more fun aspect to them rather than, I feel like sometimes the design of these things, it's like designed with like a more expensive material or something, and that's the design. I wonder if there's just a more creative approach to either the fencing or could be color or it's just something that has like it's almost like the surface of it's almost like its own little art installation that's maybe recognizable or maybe each one's independent. That's what I was wondering. So I see that image on the top there. It very much looks like a designed like to protect some sort of infrastructure type thing.
I mean, it's a little electrical substation.
Yeah.
Right, like.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be personally looking for anything expensive or even more expensive materials, just a little bit more creativity and expression of those
Yeah.
protections.
Could we zoom in on the one on the top right since it's not?
What was that, Mom?
Could we zoom in on the one to the top?
The top.
TPS.
The TPS.
Okay.
It says Eastern Guide. But some identity and maybe an element of continuity.
Or can that live actually under our guideway and give land back or?
Right. Talking about reflecting the surrounding neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, some are in single family, I don't know if they really have it, they're in different types of settings, so is that,
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe in the single family, maybe in those areas, they're trying to go away, but in a more industrial area, it's a little bit more, I'm like kind of thinking of like, along the light rail corridor as you go through Soto, I really enjoy the graffiti, the art graffiti that they put on the back of all of those, warehouses, they're blank warehouses. Yeah, it's just kind of a neat experience to go through. So I'm not the artist here or anything, but I just think something, like a fancier fence and CMU or something would be.
It does feel like a moment when a TPSS in an industrial area is something very different than a TPSS in a residential neighborhood. It's almost like it's come home.
Yeah, yes. That's right. And it belongs there. I mean, it could be really, I think some just intentionality behind the design of it is what maybe we would.
Okay, so you want to compile your stuff?
I have a couple more things, just
Okay.
really, I know we're running short on time. So circulation, the bikes and pedestrians, that's your comment about the SDOT. Okay, so that kind of falls under this as well. That's not house circulation.
So that would be
And
a
that's
presentation
bicycles.
to us by SDOT and continued coordination between Sound Transit and
Gotcha.
SDOT.
Yeah. And then I was just wondering, I didn't see anything on sustainability. Missed it. That's okay. And I'm just kind of curious if there's a sustainability approach. I know that there's, public transportation is in itself sustainable. So I'm just curious if there was any additional information that you guys might have for that you could share with us. Just a request on whatever you guys are looking at doing. Concrete, like low fly ash concrete, or I don't know, whatever it is that you guys have been looking at, it might be nice to just have a slide that addresses.
And more
future.
In the
More
future presentation.
specifically, I know that we've heard from you all in the past that that envision and lead pairing have been a focus. And so understanding which specific, they're not called pillars in envision, the categories in envision, which of those are most important to you all, and some of the goals associated with envision would be great to hear.
So Ben's gonna wrap up what his, he's gonna summarize it. But do you have any things you want to clarify?
Yeah.
My arm is tired.
Yeah, no, I truly appreciate the conversation around the columns on the guideway, and I totally get it. What I hear is looking for consistency, intentionality, that next layer of refinement over the columns. When the conversation was going to which column should it be, that to me was kind of getting into that problem solving range versus really, we really appreciate when you can define the problem for us. And then we've got wonderful teams of engineers, creative people, all kinds of folks, and they will come up with. things.
I don't think I care which one it is, just not two.
Another one.
Yeah. What I was hearing was, let's really look at the column types, where they land, and how can that be made consistent so that this is a coherent object in the landscape? And whether the elements from the bridge are repeated in some way in the other parts of the guideway, or maybe the bridge is really offset in a contrast with the rest of the guideway. I think it's probably up to be determined as we move into final design. So thank you for that conversation. I really appreciate that. On the TPSS designs, yes, the enclosures are designed to reflect the neighborhood. So each one is treated as its own little design exercise. And yeah, we would definitely think about exactly the sorts of things you were talking about. And then on sustainability, admittedly, yes, we did not talk specifically to that. We have in the past globally for the project. And Darren did mention, like in some of those redevelopment areas, some stormwater. We can look at low impact development, so there are things that are in the works, and we can certainly come back next time and be more specific about sustainability.
And did you have any thoughts on sort of I don't know if it's a laundry list or just a list of potential uses for the sites under those? Does that seem?
I think that's something we can come back next time and talk about. We still are at a point where we still have the final publication of the EIS to come out. There's a lot of work to be done. And then, yes, we can talk about potential uses for surplus sites. And, like a lot of the conversations we'll have on surplus sites or non-transit uses, we really need to look at partnerships. And Sound Transit needs to focus on delivering transit, both capital and the day-to-day operations.
And Julie, related to that, I think one thing that would be really helpful as you're looking at the potential for those is which of these things are possible for Sound Transit, which of these things are cool ideas but would require partnership or maintenance or partnership for each piece of that puzzle. And I think bringing some of those needs in order to make these community goals happen, the more transparent those are, the more we can encourage partnership for those.
Ben, you want to say the action?
Actually, I just wanted to ask the team, both here and online, was there anything else you guys noticed you wanted to mention?
Well, I do want to mention all the conversation about what's happening under the guideway. We didn't really get into the storm drainage aspects of the project, but there is substantial storm drainage requirements that we need to meet, and that will take up space on the ground and needs to be managed and maintained. And then there is examples of more LID type stormwater management, wetland type management, which may be more appropriate for some of those other areas that you guys pointed to. So it's a need and need we're trying to incorporate with some of all the other things we're trying to do, but it is a need.
Oh, that sounds great. Anything?
I want to add one comment about what's possible under the guideways. There's a lot of discussions among departments beyond us about what can happen under the guideways. And there's definitely people within operations and facilities that would prefer nothing happened under the guideways. So this isn't a typical way we might work together, but it could be easier if we had a list of things that we could find out how feasible it is, because coming up with a list, it's going to hit a lot of no's right off the bat. But it could be easier if we knew what the city wanted and we could start being more creative about whether it's possible or not.
That's great.
And I would also ask, so we've talked about the activation of like programming and people in the space perspective, but I want to note that ecological components alongside the stormwater management components that we're describing, also have some of the community benefits. So anyways, we can consider both of those things in this breadth of spaces that we have. Valuable.
Okay, I'm gonna close it down because otherwise Jill's gonna take over my very limited role here.
But the action we want us to take it.
Yeah, so I think, we're not voting on this, correct?
Yeah,
We are voting.
That's what you
Okay,
need to
so-
say. Yeah,
So we are, Seattle Design Commission, we're recommending approval of the preliminary action phase for the Soto guideways. And the only recommendation that I believe that we have right now is to take a look at the columns and come back with a more cohesive column, kind of, what would you call it? Language typology across the site.
There was one recommendation I would say about the under guideway, just to look for appropriate uses for this specific area.
Okay.
The Soto area.
Okay, look for appropriate or list of appropriate uses and partnerships with support that you might need. So with that,
Would we add to that continuing coordination with SDOT to understand bike opportunities?
Oh, yeah.
in those areas?
yes,
That's what I think.
but is that a recommendation as well?
Recommendation.
Yeah.
It's not a recommendation that they need to follow.
Right, I think that's with SDOT, right?
Yeah.
Or no?
Yeah, but let's get it in there.
Okay,
It's definitely us with SDOT and then continuing coordination between
okay.
the department and South Transit. Do others agree with that?
Well, I think it's fun. I think in our action, we can say we appreciate certain things. We look forward to certain things like future coordination, like these other things. But our ask of transit specifically out of this is, as a recommendation, is that we're really looking forward to more coordination on the guideway, on the column types, and on the under. And I believe Barbara even brought up the idea that we might throw some ideas out there too. So we might have to put that in. It's a mutual list of uses. Not just us putting it on them.
So should I try to restate all of that before we vote, or is this clear?
I think it's clear. I think we're okay.
Okay,
We also have a.
yes. So we'll start with you, Molly.
Yes, approve.
Yes, vote to approve.
Vote to approve.
Yes. I vote to approve. I really appreciate you guys and all the hard work that you've done. It's really been great. So thank you.
I have to go too. Yeah, I did. I tried to.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry. Did I?
We thought this was a.
Through your S.
No, this is just-
I thought you did. Sorry.
So if we'd stayed on time, we'd only be not as late as we are. So what do you want to do next?
Well, I think we should
Is that
just
stand up
do
and stretch
it
for a
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A quick break, maybe 5 minutes.
Okay.
And admittedly, the other two presentations are shorter, so.
Yeah, we should be
we'll
able to
make up for time, I think.
Yeah.
We want to make sure the content is questions on material.
Right.
Great. I mean, it's like we'll get so. Yeah, we have questions. I think that was her. That means.
That's my question. I'm just gonna realize. Maybe just.
Oh, you need to cut sheet.
Yes. Here it is. Yeah. That's pretty good. I don't think we the first half of this. Something, yeah. But I kept watching it, like.
The second one is very easy.
Yeah.
The second one is very exciting.
It went really fast.
Yeah.
And like every time I looked.